Hello. Thank you for joining us today at Kindred Church. I'm so glad we get to spend this time together. I want to start today by telling you a little story. There was once a woman who was traveling alone on business, and now at the tail end of her trip, her flight was delayed. Not knowing how long she would have to sit around the airport waiting, she went to the terminal store to try and find a book to read and maybe a little snack. Soon she found a book that was, at least according to the cover and the back cover, interesting, and a bag of cookies. Now, the weather had delayed a lot of flights that day, so finding a quiet place to sit and read would be a challenging test. But she found where there were a few other readers that had settled, and as she began to read her book, the man that was sitting next to her became very bold. He grabbed a cookie from the bag that was sitting in the seat between them. Now, at first, she tried to ignore what had happened. She didn't want to make a scene. So she just went on munching the cookies and watched the clock, hoping that the flight would come soon. But this gutsy cookie thief continued to eat her cookies. And she was just getting more and more irritated, thinking, if I wasn't so nice, I would just give him a piece of my mind. And with each cookie he took one too. And when only one cookie was left, she wondered, what's he going to do? And with a smile on his face and kind of a nervous laugh, he took the last cookie, broke it in half, and offered her one as he ate the other. So she snatched it from his hand and thought, who does this guy think he is? This guy has some nerve. He didn't even show me any gratitude. And she was just infuriated by this point. And I'm sure it was all over her face. And when her flight was called, she was so relieved to be done with this man. So she gathered all of her belongings, headed to the gate, and refused to look back at this awful cookie thief. And then she boarded her plane and just kind of sank back into her seat. Once they were finally in her air, she was ready to start reading her book again. So she reached in her bag to retrieve it, and as she reached in, she grabbed something that she didn't expect. It was her bag of cookies. And then it hit her. She thought to herself, if mine are here, then the others were his, and he was just trying to share. That meant I was the rude one. I was the ingrate. I was the cookie thief. And all he was doing was showing me grace. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Grace. Generosity and grace. But before we do, let's go to God in prayer. Father God, we thank you for today. We thank you for the grace that you offer us. It is something that we don't fully understand and definitely don't deserve. But we thank you for your generosity towards us, for always giving us more than we deserve. Help us to be more like you in our love for others. So over the past few weeks, we have been looking at some of the questions that Jesus asked and how those questions challenged people's lives. While doing this, we're also trying to reflect upon our own lives using these same questions, and while opening ourselves up to these teachings. And today's question is about God's generous love and incredible grace. Now, when speaking about God's love, I don't think the word generous is strong enough, which is why a lot of the times when we're talking about God, we often string a whole bunch of adverbs to it. Like God is lavishly, extravagantly, startlingly, hilariously generous. But that's not how Jesus explained God's love and grace. Instead, he told stories to help us understand. I think he knew that our human nature makes it very difficult to simply receive God's extravagant generosity. It all seems a little too good to be true. because no one else treats us this way. We want our love the old-fashioned way. We want to earn it. And we genuinely think that we can. So, in most of Jesus' stories about God's grace, he includes a character who objects to it or maybe outright refuses it. And in doing this, Jesus is holding up a mirror so that we can see ourselves and see how foolish we look when we reject God's abundant generosity. But before we dig into a couple of these stories, I think it's important for us to consider three possible outcomes when we stand before a judge. Outcome one, justice. We get exactly what we deserve. That $400 fine for going 85 in a 65, justice means we get to have to pay that whole fine. We get exactly what we deserve. Second outcome, mercy. We get less or more than what we deserve. A $100 fine is instead given instead of $400. And then there's outcome three, which is grace, which is we get exactly what we don't deserve, or no fine at all, in the simplest of terms. So I want us to look at a couple stories that talk about the incredible grace of God. The first one comes from Matthew 20. This is the story of the 11th hour workers. If you want to turn over, it's kind of a long story. Be good to follow along. This is from Matthew 20. As Jesus was telling what the kingdom of heaven would be like, he told the story. Early one morning, a man went out to hire some workers for his vineyard. After he had agreed to pay them the usual amount for a day's work, he sent them off to the vineyard. And then about 9 that morning, the man saw some other people standing in the market with nothing to do, and he promised to pay them what was fair if they could do work in his vineyard. So they all went. Then at noon, and again at 3 in the afternoon, he returned to the market, and each time made the same agreement with others who were loafing around with nothing to do. Finally, about 5 in the afternoon, the man went back and found some others standing there. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing?" "Because no one hired us," they answered. Then he told them to go to work in his vineyard. That evening, the owner of the vineyard told the man in charge to call them in and give them their money. He also told the man to begin with the ones who were hired last. When the workers arrived, the ones who had been hired at 5 in the afternoon were given a full day's pay. The workers who had been hired first thought they would be given more than the others, but when they were given the same, they began to complain to the owner of the vineyard. They said, "The ones who were hired last worked for only 1 hour, but you paid them the same as you did for us, and we worked all day in the hot sun." The owner answered them, "Friends, I didn't cheat you. I paid you exactly what we agreed upon. Now take your money and go. What business is it of yours if I want to pay them the same as I paid you? Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Why should you be jealous if I want to be generous?" So according to our 3 outcomes, there's justice. And justice would mean paying everyone in exactly proportionate amounts according to how many hours they had worked. Outcome 2, mercy. Mercy would be paying everyone a little extra, but still in proportionate amounts. But Jesus said that the owner acted with grace and paid everyone the same amount, no matter how much work they had done. Predictably, the first hour workers said, "This is not fair." That's one of my least favorite phrases. It's not fair. It's not fair is one of the most ungodly, graceless statements a person of faith can make. But the owner of the vineyard reminds them that they are not being treated unfairly. They are, in fact, being paid exactly what they agreed upon. Then the story concludes with today's question. Why should you be jealous if I want to be generous? This exact same or a very similar scenario is repeated in probably a more familiar story to a lot of people, the story of the prodigal son. Let's read that one together too. Jesus said, once there was a father who had 2 sons. The younger son came with his father and said, Father, I think it's time to give me my share of your estate. So the father went ahead and distributed between the 2 sons their inheritance. Shortly afterward, the younger son packed up all his belongings and traveled off to see the world. He journeyed to a far-off land where he would soon waste all that he had been given on binge drinking, extravagant living, and the ladies of the night. With everything spent and nothing left, he grew hungry because of the severe famine in the land. So he begged the farmer to hire him. The farmer agreed and sent him out to feed the pigs. The son was so famished that he was willing to eat the slop that had been given to the pigs. Then it says this, humiliated, the son finally realized what he was doing. So he thought to himself, there are many workers at my father's house who have all the food they want with plenty to spare. They lack nothing. Why am I here dying of hunger, feeding these pigs and eating their slop? I will go back to my father's home and say, Father, I was wrong. I have sinned against you. I'll never again be worthy to be called your son. But please, Father, just treat me like one of your employees. So the young man set off for home. From a long distance away, we're told. From a long distance away, his father saw him coming, dressed as a beggar. Then with great compassion welling up in his heart, the father raced out to meet him on the road. He swept him up in his arms, hugged him dearly, and kissed him over and over with tender love. Then the son said, Father, I was wrong. I have sinned against you. I could never deserve to be called your son. Just let me be. And the father interrupted him and said, Son, you are now home. Then he turned to his employees, and the father said, Quick, bring me the best robe, my very own robe, and I will place it on his shoulders. Bring me the ring, the seal of kinship, and I will place it on his finger. Bring out the best shoes you can find for my son, and then let's prepare a great feast, for my beloved son was once dead, but now he's alive. He was once lost, but now he is found. And everyone celebrated with overwhelming joy. But the older son was out working in the field when his brother returned. As he approached the house, he heard the music of celebration and dancing. He called over one of the servants and asked, What's going on here? The servant replied, It's your younger brother. He's returned home, and your father is throwing a party to celebrate his homecoming. The older son became very angry and refused to go in and celebrate. So his father came out and pled with him, Come and enjoy this feast with us. This older son said, Father, listen, how many years have I worked for you like a slave, performing every duty you've asked as a faithful son, and I have never once disobeyed you. But you've never thrown a party for me because of my faithfulness. Never once have you given me a goat that I could feast on and celebrate with my friends, as this son of yours is doing now. Look at him. He comes back after wasting your wealth on prostitutes and reckless living, and here you are throwing a great feast to celebrate him. The father said, My son, you are always with me by my side. Everything I have is yours to enjoy. It is only right to celebrate and rejoice like this. Your brother was once dead and gone, but now he is alive and back with us again. He was lost, but now he is found. Now, both sons in this story had a false image of their father. Both regarded him as a harsh taskmaster, a taskmaster that would whose favor had to be earned every day. They saw him as someone who was never satisfied, and was certainly never generous. The younger son responds by demanding his fair share of inheritance, and then what? He runs away. And we get the first hint of the father's true character when he consents. The father didn't have to give him his inheritance. The father didn't have to let him run off and do what he wanted, but he allowed him to. He allowed him to the freedom to express himself. He lets him go. And then we're told that the other brother responds by staying home and working all the harder to earn his father's love and respect. So once again, let's think about our three outcomes, maybe from the older son's perspective. Justice. The pig pen was justice. In the pig pen, that younger brother is getting exactly what he deserves. Mercy. He hopes that his father will treat him like one of the servants. If his brother comes home, that's fine. But as long as he stays out in the fields and lives like one of the servants who works out there, that's okay. But then there's this grace thing. Instead, the father throws him a party and celebrates his return. Predictably, the older brother objects. He says, "I've been diligent and faithful, but you never threw me a party. And now this son of yours," notice the language there, "this son of yours, not my brother, but this son of yours, comes slinking home after squandering all your money on alcohol and gambling and prostitutes, and you're throwing him a party?" But then the father reminds him that he could have been throwing a party every night if he wanted. He says, "Everything I have is yours. Stop trying to earn what my love has already generously provided." But we have to celebrate because our relationship with your brother, in other words, not just my son, but your brother, has been restored. Our family has been reunited. And he might have added, "Or are you just envious because I am generous?" Now, why would anyone object to God's generosity and grace? Well, because it's not really fair, is it? Grace is not fair, and that's a good thing. Be honest. Think about this for just a second. How would you feel if you were the older brother? How would you feel if you were one of the first hour workers? How would you feel as the older brother of the first hour workers? What would your response be in that situation? If someone who had just worked 1 hour received the same pay as you after putting in 12 hours of work, or if the younger brother who got to go off and do whatever he wanted came home and got to have a party while you stayed there and did all the hard work and probably did all of his hard work too. How would you feel if you were the older sibling in that situation? When I was in preaching school, I preached at a little church in Irving, Texas. I was only supposed to be an intern, but the preacher, right after I was hired, took off, so I had to fill in. But one Sunday, just for kind of illustrative purposes, I altered the story of the prodigal son. I had the father throw a party for the older brother to honor all of his years of faithful service on the farm while putting the younger son out in the fields to work. And I still remember after church, there's this one woman who came up to me and said, "You know what? That's how the story should have been written." She just didn't get it. But her objection was based on an illusion. Her objection was based on a false image of God. It's the illusion that we can earn God's favor. But we can't. We can't earn God's favor because, is it because we're such horrible sinners that we can never do anything good? No, that's not it at all. But because that's simply not who God is. That's that false image talking. Look, God doesn't deal with anyone on the basis of what they deserve. God deals with everyone according to their incredible love, their kindness, their great compassion, and extravagant generosity. Think about this for just a moment. If you could earn God's love, would it really be love anymore? There's no generosity if you're just being paid what you're earned. But more importantly, there's also no relationship. There's only a business arrangement where you get what you deserve. I wonder if this is the way the older brother had lived out his life, constantly trying to earn his father's love. Now, we're never told how that story ended, and there's probably good reason for that. Maybe that's because Jesus wanted us to write the ending for ourselves. Perhaps we're meant to arrive at our own conclusions about the fate of this older brother, prompting us to reflect on where we might find ourselves if we choose to follow in that older brother's footsteps. And in the other parable, I believe the truth is hidden in one idea. We're all 11th hour workers. You know, for anyone who's been a Christian for a while, it's pretty easy to identify with the first hour workers. And as such, the story is seen as a reminder to be more forgiving and accepting of those who come to the faith later in life. But the parable explodes with meaning when we finally realize that we have all been treated with undeserved, extravagant love and grace. And there's absolutely no reason to be envious because of God's generosity. Rather, we are called to press into Yahweh's generous heart, to extend generosity and grace to others, and accept our Heavenly Father's lavish, extravagant love for each and every one of us. I hope you can come away with that today, and we'll see you again real soon.